So welcome everyone. My name is Susanne Breinbeck, and I'm a social anthropologist and associate professor at University College Copenhagen. And today's lesson is called Questioning Care. We're going to be looking at how daycare institutions serve as sites of integration and the dilemmas this entails, since for some families, their futures may lie elsewhere. They may eventually leave Denmark, as we discussed also in the last class. And I'm going to present a specific case of a girl I call Aisha, and we're going to look at how care and what could be called coercive concern may play out. So through this talk, I'm also going to be touching on how alternative or various conflicting pedagogies oftentimes coexist within the same institution. And I'm going to end with some reflections on care as doubt and presence. But before I really get into this talk, I thought I would start out with this image, this quite iconic photo that you may know, depicting a policeman talking to a Syrian girl. And this was during the big influx of refugees during 2015, where refugees were walking on the Danish freeways. And I think it just really shows us this glimpse of a moment of care, you could call it, the spontaneity of it, the way he kneels down and looks at the girl at an eye level, humor being entailed to make some kind of connection. We don't know what they're talking about, whether they share a language, but it looks from the way they are also using their hands and gestures that they are maybe communicating through body language. So just this quite moving image to set the scene about the relevance of care, even when it may be just a moment of care. So now in terms of daycare centers can be seen as key sites of integration. So after World War II in Denmark, they became a universal offer, enabling women to work alongside men. And now in Danish, the term dagtilbud, literally day offer, which has this kind of neoliberal connotation that it is an offer that is something you choose, is a bit contradictory, as Arne Kiel has pointed out. Because in fact, it's not optional in Denmark. You must attend daycare. Children must be language tested from the age of 3. And part of the law called dagtilbudsloven, the daycare law, is that children must undergo language stimulation. And this has particular meaning to refugee families and migrant families. Another political context which is relevant to mention is that upon receiving asylum in Denmark, quite often refugees will be provided housing in what is called social housing areas. This is not always the case, but quite often. And these have politically been designated as ghetto areas. So politically, they've been defined through certain criteria in terms of high levels of crime, a high proportion of low-income families and low educational level families, and also upon the level of ethnicities, the amount of people with different ethnic backgrounds. So this provides a certain context for the pedagogical work that takes place also. So politically, as I said, they have been designated as ghettos, and this is the topic of a lot of political debate. Former Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, in his New Year's speech, for instance, said, "I am deeply concerned about the social housing areas in Denmark where children grow up without learning the Danish language probably." And he said, "We must take children out of the ghetto and into a Danish environment." So you see this quite drastic statement. So what is entailed here is that daycare is sort of the Danish environment between what has even been called holes in the map of Denmark. However, to many newly arrived refugee families, daycare institutions may actually be an entirely new phenomenon. I have a quote here from a mother from Iran who said, "In Iran, a lot of people would care for Mina, her daughter, but here we depend on the help of strangers." So in this case, she needed the help to take care of her daughter, but it was ambiguous and new to her, as we also discussed in our last class, that this care was provided for by people who initially were strangers. It's also the case that some refugees, depending on where they come from, may be familiar with more school-like preschool models, but unfamiliar with this particular type of Danish or Scandinavian pedagogical models. And it can be phrased overall as posing this overall dilemma. So are children children of the family or children of the state? One Syrian grandmother who found it hard to accept the fact that now the family had finally been reunited after long-term separation, since family members had not migrated at the same time. And now they had to be separated because of the requirement that parents should learn language or go to vocational training or internships, and therefore children should spend time in daycare. And she said, what's most important, integration into society or integration into the family? Yeah, so as we can see, this transition period, or what in Danish is called indkøring, the time that it takes to adjust to daycare institutions, whereby children are to be separated from their parents, often during many hours every day, is something that's not straightforward, but can be difficult to adjust to. As we shall also see, this metaphor of so are children children of the family or children of the state also applies to the ways in which the state actually intervenes into parenting practices in a number of ways. And often this revolves around dilemmas related to time.